back here on our program, the platform, and we are talking about yoga today with the owner of Studio Hannah. She is also the instructor. And you were talking about various vulnerabilities.
Yes, the Community Rising event that's coming up next, and the topic is vulnerability. And I was saying in the beginning, but really why I asked Alexis to come on the show today is because I wanted to really talk about her vulnerable post that she posted out there that I read, and how much it meant to me for her to open up and share her process of what she's been going through and how she's handling it. And just to try to get some healing out there, because I know personally I need some healing, but I also feel that a lot of people need healing on this island, especially after Hurricane Dorian and a lot of other things that are happening in the island today.
Yeah, speak to that, Alexis.
Yeah, sure. So I'll share briefly what I was talking about in the post, and then I'll kind of maybe open it up a little bit. But in 2019, I had a very difficult year. It was at the end of 2018 that one of my dogs died, and my dogs, if you know me, they're like my children. They come everywhere with me. And then 4 months later, the other one died. And then a few months later, really serious kind of end-stage addiction came to the surface again in my family, which has been a very heavy theme in my life, alcoholism. And then kind of right as some of that was hitting all at once, my husband and I had been trying to get pregnant, and I did, and then I found out it was ectopic and had to have it surgically removed. And this is all happening in a very short span of time. And a lot of these things, not all of them, were firsts for me, but what I was writing about in the post was what's happened to me as a result, because I think one of the first things I said in the post is, it's not about sharing for pity or to get people to buy into it, and it's also not about saying that I have the worst pain in the world or mine hurts the worst or that other people aren't going through worse, especially with things like the hurricane. It in some ways it was like, do I put this out there? But my whole point was that we're all experiencing something. We've all experienced or are experiencing or will experience at some point traumas. Some of them are really obvious traumas. Some of them, things like Hurricane Dorian, things like if people go through sexual assaults, domestic abuse, if they face war, these are really obvious traumas that people are experiencing. Other things might not be as obvious of a trauma, right? Some people might look at it and say, okay, your dog died, they died, like it's not such a trauma. Well, for me it was, right? A trauma, if we're gonna broaden the definition, it could be something I always use in quotes, as small as, because it's all relative, right? Being called stupid growing up, or being called fat growing up. For me, I got called fat a few times and it turned into an eating disorder. Whereas somebody else could have that happen to them, be called fat and be like, well, that person was rude for saying that. That doesn't define me, and on with the next. So when we really expand the definition of what a trauma is, and it's all relative because we can't measure people's pain against each other, then we're all healing from something, or we all need to heal from something. And I think that when we see something as catastrophic as Hurricane Dorian was, and continues to be, it brings to light, it makes it obvious the amount of healing that it brings to the surface. And if I can say that there's anything good about it, then it opens the conversation for healing, right? A conversation that maybe we weren't willing to have before, or not on that level. And so, when I talk about yoga, it's one modality for healing, right? There are so many others too. And so I always like to point that out, because if people don't ever see themselves doing any of those things, to me, the first part of it is acknowledging that we have a hurt, acknowledging that we have something to heal. And there's a balance, because once we acknowledge, or if we're willing to acknowledge, we also have to find the balance by not staying there too long. And how long is too long will depend on the person, it will depend on the situation. I don't have an answer for that. But finding that balance, and then what is some way that we can begin that process? Does that look like something like yoga or meditation? Does that look like going to a therapist? Does it look like going to a trusted person that we feel that we can be vulnerable with? Like, what does it actually mean?
Yeah. When you went through these traumatic experiences, you used yoga, I'm sure, to bring about healing, yes?
I used a lot of things, but yoga was a big part of it, sure.
Yoga was a big part of it. And you feel that after your dog or dogs died, for instance, that by concentrating and by doing yoga, that it brought some relief to you?
Well, I'd say the first thing that brought relief was acknowledging that I had a lot of grief and not trying to shut it down, right? I think that people often, what sometimes happens is this feeling of, I should be over this, or if not, I should be over this. If I acknowledge this, and if I really don't close off my heart and I sit with what I'm feeling, then it's gonna consume me, right?
But people, practicing Christians, talk about faith, and you have to deepen your faith. And of course, you believe in Jesus Christ, and because of that, you are a person of deep faith. That counts for something, doesn't it?
Sure. Yeah. I have faith. For me, it's not particularly through the lens of Christianity. I have faith in something. But I don't know that it's a requirement. I think it helps. I think it can make it easier. But I also think you could look at it as, can you trust that you can make it through it? Can you trust that there's a lesson in it, that it can actually transform you in a positive way if you're willing to let it, right? These are things that maybe don't require faith per se, but a trust, right? A willingness. I think that often and this is an oversimplification, but when bad things happen to people can often go one of two ways, right? They can close themselves off, they can shut down, they can say, I'm not opening myself up to this again because I don't want to be hurt again, right? And we see sometimes people harden. And then we see sometimes people who have really horrific things happen to them and they make something beautiful out of it, right? I think when I say trusting that it won't destroy us, that it won't consume us, trusting that it can be used as a force for good, maybe not immediately, and probably not immediately, because we have to give ourselves time to grieve, whatever it is.
There are some people who are watching this program who might be, a person terminally ill.
Yeah.
Yoga can help.
You said yoga can help.
Yoga can help, yes. What is your suggestion to that person who has been given a bad report by a doctor?
Yeah. I heard something. I was listening to one of my favorite teachers. Let me back up a little bit, then I'll say that. I saw something recently and it said, we're all standing in line for our end. We're all standing in line. You can't get out of the line. You can't skip the line. We're all standing in line, right? And so what can we do with our lives right now that then when that time comes, we will have done what we needed to do, right? So that was the first thing. And one of my greatest teachers, he's a spiritual teacher named Ram Dass, and he recently died just in December. And he used to work with the dying. for a long time. And he would say, he said, I actually am one of those rare people who loves working with people who are dying, because it is one of the times in our life that we get closest to truth. When we're near our death and we're facing our death, there's not so much room for, often for the niceties and the pleasantries and all these things. There's a deeper honesty. But what he said is, when he could hold space, it made people realize, or it allowed people to not only be dying, right? And that really hit me. I was like, because often, and I can't speak to this personally from a personal place, so I can only offer what I have, is that what we sometimes see is that when people are dying, they're consumed with dying, but there's sometimes a forgetting that they're also still living, right? It's not the only thing that they're doing, it's part of what they're doing. I think that any practice, and so when I say yoga, I mean probably less the physical aspect, unless that's been a practice or it's something that really makes you feel good, then do it, absolutely.
Well, shouldn't you just concentrate on the positive? When you get these bad reports, or when you're going through these traumatic experiences, shouldn't you find the positives that you can concentrate on so that you can get the kind of relief that you want?
I would say yes and no. I would say yes in the sense it depends on if it's something like a terminal illness, and if it's truly terminal, because we've seen people go into things like spontaneous remission. And what scientists are now discovering is that our thoughts are creating chemical reactions in our body which are making us sicker or making us healthier.
Yes.
So in that sense, yes, focus on the positive. They say if you get believe the diagnosis but not the prognosis. So if they say you have stage 3 cancer, yes, that diagnosis might be real. But if they say you have 3 months left to live, you might have 10 years left to live, so not the prognosis. But the thing I would say about people who are truly terminally ill and the end is coming near and all these things, from what I've learned, understood, read, sometimes when we only focus on the positive, we're not actually leaving them space to be with their own emotion. And sometimes it's for ourselves that we're trying to say, it's gonna be fine, and then we turn around and we're like, oh my God, they only have a day left, right? That's for us. And sometimes what they need is the space to be honestly and openly with their own emotion and their own feelings.
Interesting. Well, I need to visit your studio.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yes.
I would love that.
Visit your studio, see what you're about.
Yeah.
And perhaps you can teach me how to concentrate and meditate.
I think so.
Well, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having
being
me.
here today. And your studio is at Cable Beach, is it?
Cable Beach, we're in the Marco's Pizza Plaza upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Bianca,
Yes,
for
it
bringing
was-
this wonderful guest
Yeah,
today.
a wonderful show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching and listening to our program. Good evening, everyone.